This is such good news for me. Well, look at that beautiful carcass. Well, I was just editing the video on dealing with carcasses and caring for meat and stuff, and I just wanted to say a few opening statements, I guess, things I thought of. Now, the reason I did this video is because I just remember going through the process of trying to figure all this out. And, you know, if you do research and read about it, you're going to find kind of the usual university extension information, USDA type stuff that is actually very conservative. And they'll tend to give you, like, you know, numbers to follow and stuff like that. And if you put yourself in the kinds of positions that I do and have for a long time, living without electricity or with just like a refrigerator, or not wanting to avail yourself of, you know, big coolers in town to store, you know, to age meat or store it for a while and all that stuff. If it's cold outside, and that's great. I mean, if it's very cold or it's very cold at night or something like that, that makes everything a lot easier. Like for me, almost every time I have a carcass, you know, it's not ideal conditions for sure. So then what that means, what I'm saying is that information becomes kind of useless to you because you look at it and you're like, well, what do I do in this situation, you know? And so over the years, I've just kind of adapted strategies and gotten kind of an intuitive feel for what I can get away with and what I need to do to get a carcass through and cared for well. Now, the other thing is that people might worry about spoilage and like, is this meat going to kill you or something like that? Now, this, I guess, is just my opinion, but, you know, I think of the way that animals that you buy at the meat counter and grocery stores and stuff are raised and then processed, and then, you know, the refrigeration thing and how old they are by the time you get them is all pretty disgusting to me. You know, I view what I do as much cleaner, and yeah, sure, there's all kinds of sources of bacteria around when I'm processing meat, and there's the potential for infection and spoilage and all of that. But, you know, I'm not like getting an animal that's been living basically in a cesspool of disease and filth, you know, and then it's like gone through who knows what process. I mean, you don't get to see what happens in those plants. But let's face it, the strict like food handling safety rules that are on the back of your meat package are there because of the way these processes are carried out, the way these animals are raised. And, you know, we've bred like these super pathogens that make people really sick. And the meat, you know, can be contaminated with salmonella and, you know, these strains of E. coli that are extremely dangerous and can kill you. So yeah, I think of what I do as much cleaner, even if my meat starts to go off, which, you know, doesn't happen to me anymore. But if it did, I don't even worry about that. Like most of the people that I know who do this kind of stuff, and, you know, myself would probably tell you that if meat is going funky, but it has never been cooked and it's still raw and you clean it up best you can and cook it well, it's probably not going to make you sick at all. And I've tested that myself quite a bit. And, you know, I'm not telling you what to do or to do that. I'm just saying that what we think of as spoilage, it may not be, how do I say this? Basically, because of the way that animals are raised in these really disgusting crowded conditions, it's like a city, right, where you spread disease, and we've got like antibiotic resistant stuff growing and these terrible strains of pathogenic bacteria and stuff. You know, I'm not dealing with any of that stuff. And if I understand that, you know, I need to cook the stuff before I eat it and all that, you know, everything's just fine. And I just think of my whole process and all the stuff I do as much cleaner and safer than anything I could buy. That's what I'm saying. But if you're new to preserving food and dealing with stuff like this, that takes a little time to build confidence, and you're just used to eating the stuff from the store, and, you know, you have built kind of, it hasn't made you sick, maybe, hopefully, and or not that you know of, and you have built like trust in that. So eventually you'll build trust in your own stuff, and this will all make more sense or feel more comfortable, I guess. So I think that's all I wanted to say. We're going to just get on to the video now, and I hope that the intention of this is to kind of help fast track you towards where I'm at now, with kind of an understanding of, feeling like I have an understanding of what I can get away with and what I need to do in certain situations that are not ideal for storing meat. And that's what a lot of the information I present is trying to just kind of like fast track people along to not have to go through as much stuff as I did to figure all this stuff out, I guess. Well, I got my second deer in evening of closing day. I feel very fortunate to have gotten this deer. And I used to just gather and grow a lot more of my own food, but living by myself, taking care of this place and trying to do, my website and YouTube and all that stuff just really cuts into the time. And there's some other reasons, but I've eaten out of grocery stores a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm kind of over it, and I want cleaner food. So I'm really happy to be putting some more meat in my freezer. Well, look at that beautiful carcass, nice and clean. So now I'm just going to wrap this in a sheet for the night to keep, flies and yellow jackets off early in the morning, because it's a very warm night. It's going to be warm in the morning, so everybody will be out playing real early. So last night at about an hour and a half before hunting season ended, I got a deer, and I'm very happy about that. And now I have to deal with the carcass and all the parts and stuff like that, which I've kind of been starting to do today. Now, I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about how to deal with meat, how to deal with carcasses when you have conditions that may not be perfectly ideal. And this happens to me pretty much whenever I have a carcass. But there are strategies you can use to adapt to those situations to keep the meat from spoiling, and maybe age it to improve it a little bit before you freeze it or eat it or whatever. Now, I thought this would be a great opportunity, especially because it's 103 degrees. I shot this in the evening last night, and it almost became warmer after dark. It was totally bizarre, and it was warm all night, and it's been warm all day and just slowly climbing, and now it's about 2:30 probably, so we're kind of hitting like the peak temperature right now. And I'm not worried about this carcass yet. I'm not worried about it yet, but I'm starting to get a little antsy to get it dealt with, and that's what I'm doing as soon as we're done shooting this short video. So we have two main things going on here. One is we don't want our meat to spoil, and the other one is we may want to age it a little bit. And aging is basically just the meat improves as I think enzymes that are in the meat are active, tenderizing the meat, and the flavor changes too. I like aged meat for the most part, and I think it's a good thing to do, but you don't have to do it. And of course that's very dependent on the animal. Some need it more, some need it less. So let's start with spoilage. So spoilage happens with moisture and heat, and you combine those two together, spoilage happens faster. So by eliminating one of those two or both of them, we can kind of manage the meat and slow spoilage. So here's a couple things that I'll do, for instance, to deal with those things when I don't have the ideal conditions, which would be a meat cooler. So in a meat cooler, the air is fairly dry. You put your carcass in there, it dries off on the outside, and it's at the temperature of like a refrigerator or close to that. So that's ideal conditions, and then you can age it in there for a week or more before you cut it up. But I don't ever have those conditions, and even if they were available in town, which they probably are, I wouldn't take my meat, I'd drive it all the way to town, pay someone to hang it at a cooler, definitely wouldn't pay them to cut it up, and if anything, you can end up tainting your carcass if the cooler isn't just super clean. You can end up tainting your carcass with like off flavors. So even if that was available to me in town, which it probably is, I wouldn't do it. I have other strategies that I use. So one thing is that you want the carcass to be dry and dry off on the outside. So, last night I did a really clean job of gutting this and skinning it, and the carcass is just super clean. And then I took a knife and I cleaned up any bloody spots that were left. I did not wash it out at all because it was so clean it didn't need it. If it's really super bloody inside, especially if you spill any guts or urine in there, then yeah, you need to wipe it down. But never just wash the whole carcass just to wash it, because that's not good. You're actually making it worse. You can introduce bacteria, move bacteria that's there already around. Better if it's just a nice clean skinned carcass, it'll start drying off right away, and that's what you want. So try to just learn to do a really clean job whenever you can, and then leave it to kind of dry. Now I wrapped this in a sheet to keep the bugs off because I knew the bugs would be out right away early in the morning. We have meat bees and of course flies, so I didn't want them on the carcass, so I wrapped it up, but this breathes pretty well. If I was leaving this for longer though, I'd want like a mesh of some kind, like mosquito netting, or to put it in a screened room, because then air could actually move across it and make sure that everything stays nice and dry, and that all the little crevices and stuff would sort of dry out. And I'll uncover this soon, but I don't want to uncover it now because the meat bees, yellow jackets, whatever you want to call them, ground bees, they're going to get all over this, and it's going to be a hassle. So another thing I did is I propped open the chest cavity. I split the ribs open with a knife, prop that open with a stick so that there's more air circulation, and it's really going to dry out in the cavity quickly. So by doing that, I've eliminated moisture. Of course, it's still moist inside the meat, but if it dries off on the outside and you don't have like colonies of bacteria starting to grow on the outside because it's wet, and warm, and then those start to grow into the meat or whatever they do, and it spoils the meat. So that's not going to happen. And of course, way inside the meat, it's not like the meat in there is clean. It's not like it's full of bacteria or something like that. Now, if you adopt that strategy, and especially if you let the carcass cool overnight and then keep it cold during the day, so if it's cold at night and warm in the day, unwrap it and let it cool off, like in the open air if possible, without any wrapping, or maybe mosquito netting if you need it. And then when it's cold, wrap it up for the day in blankets really tight and just keep it as cold as possible through the day. If it's already dry, the moisture's not going to be a problem. I mean, don't use plastic. Never wrap a carcass in plastic if you can possibly help it. And you'd be surprised if you keep managing a carcass like that, or even if it's just really dry and very clean and kept away from insects, how long it will keep in warm weather, and you can kind of just keep eating off it until it spoils, or until you have time to do something else like dry it. So another thing I do, and what I'm going to do with this right now, is I cleaned out the bottom like third of my refrigerator. I line that with butcher paper so it's nice and clean, and then I'll cut this into manageable chunks, and then I pack all that into the fridge and let it chill in there for 2 or 3 days, and then I take it out, cut it up, and put it in the freezer. So that allows me to let the meat age for a few days, and it buys me time to. Another strategy you can use that my friend uses a lot, hopefully you guys will meet him sometime in a video if he ever comes up here to visit. We'll do some videos or something. Awesome dude, awesome hunter. Anyway, what he does a lot is with his game is he'll freeze it in packages and then take the packages out 2 or 3 days early and let them thaw in the fridge, and they kind of age in there before you eat them. And I've done that too, and it does work. So bullet points. Do a clean job of skinning if you can. Learn to do that. And do a nice clean job of gutting too. If you spill guts, you have to wash it. If you don't have to wash it, don't wash it, including the inside. I just ate the tenderloins out of this last night. They're like inside the gut cavity against the back wall. Perfectly sweet, perfectly good, without any washing or anything. So you don't need to wash it out. If you spill guts and stuff, literally wash it with water like a hose, but try not to get the outside of the carcass wet if it's not in need of washing. And if there's hair on it, don't try to wash the hair off. Scrape it off, because when you wash it, it'll just stick that much worse. It won't just wash off. So don't wash it if you can help it. And then another thing you can do is take like vinegar water, soak a towel in that, and wipe the inside, all inside there, and that'll help kill bacteria, slow bacterial growth, and just clean the inside of the carcass out, especially if you've spilled something in there like guts or urine or whatever. Now, urine's not a big deal, and even guts actually aren't that big of a deal if you just wash them out right away, but you do really need to get on that and wash them out. But when you're done with all of that, try to take a dry, clean towel and just get it kind of dry, prop the chest cavity open, and let the carcass dry out, unless you're headed straight to a cooler or something like that. And I mean a game cooler. Don't take your meat, pack it warm, cut it up, put it into coolers, or wrap it in plastic or anything like that. And you don't want that thing where it's against something that doesn't breathe when it's warm. And even if it's in a cooler with ice, I mean, you get into a cooler, it's just not that cold. It's not a refrigerator. And if the carcass is all wet, or if it's like cut into pieces and they're packed in there wet, that's kind of bad news. Now in the fridge it's different. So when I pack this into the fridge, it'll tend to start sweating, and there'll be kind of wet parts packed together, but it's going to cool way down, and it'll be fine for a couple of days like that. But anytime you don't have ideal cool conditions, you really just want a dry glaze around the outside of all the natural pieces of meat, not pieces cut up where you get bacteria introduced into those cuts and then they're packed together and sitting there wet. Don't do that. And if you're out hunting or camping or something like that and it's cool at night, let it cool at night, and then wrap it up and insulate it for the day. So what I'm doing today is I'm going to unwrap this, start cutting it up, take the pieces in, get them small enough to pack in the bottom of the fridge, which will turn into just one big old meat block basically, and it'll be in there for 2 or 3 days, and I may dry some of it, but most of it's going to get cut up in a few days and then packed into the freezer to be used as needed. We'll probably revisit some other parts of the steer though in other videos soon. It started to cool down a bit, but it's still 99 degrees in here. And again, I'm really still not worried about this yet. The more time that it's out in this kind of temperatures, the faster it's going to age. And, the less it'll keep, like if let's say I freeze it and then I thaw a piece out and I have it in the fridge for a few days, it affects all of that stuff. But in terms of this, spoiling, I'm still perfectly good if I get this cut up within like a couple of hours, put in the fridge for a couple of days, and then I can cut it, freeze it, and I still can thaw it out and keep it for a couple of days. So, I've got working time. It's not as horrible as you might think if things start to heat up, but there's a limit too, obviously. You don't want to, kind of procrastinate or anything, but you do have some working time as long as everything's clean and you've kept your, meat nice and dry.